your spot on the right hand side of your screen, unless you've moved it, is somewhere where you can type the questions into the chat screen. And these I'll go through after the talk with Victoria. All of these events are videoed, so we will be posting them on our YouTube channel afterwards, and we'll make sure you get a link to them so you can go back and analyse all of my mistakes over and over again. But most importantly, this isn't happening in isolation. It would be really great if most people could volunteer to give a talk on their area of specialism, talk about the key things that they think they bring to the industry, key advice for challenges that people are facing. And if you'd like to participate in doing one of these talks, please drop Natalie, whose email address is on the screen, a line, and she will come back to you, and we're hoping to get as many people scheduled in as we can. So moving on. I'm going to control the screen next time, I think. Go on. Please, most importantly, this is your space. So it's not about the GLA or the RTPI controlling what the conversation is. This is actually about you contributing towards this. And I know we've had loads and loads of great ideas already put forward. But if you are talking about this in social media, the hashtag is plantalk, not hashtag we all love Victoria, as is on the wall behind me. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Victoria, who I don't think needs any introduction. Oh, sorry, did you want the hashtag we all love Victoria? There we go. So Victoria, time for you to take the floor, and I'll be taking down any questions, and we'll talk again in about 10 minutes. Victoria, you're on mute. Hold on. Lucy, I think we need you to unmute Victoria.
Thank you. I'm unmuted now. Welcome. Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. Sorry for that. And yes, I am the, we are the guinea pigs rather than the sacrificial lamb. I hope, absolutely delighted that working with the Greater London Authority, the Royal Town Planning Institute, has come together at pace to deliver this new TED-style talks on planning. And thank you for so many of you joining. It's great to see you all here, and I hope that you enjoy what we've got to say. And I'm just starting my stopwatch now, so I don't rattle on too much. So, as you might imagine, we've all been experiencing our own teething problems and getting online. And I'm really proud that the RTPI is now in a position where we can do more of this stuff online. I'm going to be reflecting on a few questions: how the industry has responded to and adapted to the current situation, what are the implications for the future and longer term, and then the opportunities moving forward. And I'm going to do all of that in under 15 minutes, apparently. So let's see how we go, because most importantly, I want to hear your questions as well. The first point really in how the industry has responded and reacted that I want to make is planning cannot be accused of standing still. Far from it. It is a rapidly changing landscape. We've seen primary legislation that would usually take 6 months go through in 2 weeks. We've got new guidance coming out of CLG, and there is so much that's changed over the last 5 to 6 weeks within local government and how planning authorities are doing business. It's so fast moving. We are trying to create a hub, a COVID information hub on our website, but struggling to keep up to date with it all, actually, because it is just so much going on. And this is a really positive thing. Just how quickly the planning system has geared up in London and also beyond is really been very impressive. As of 4th of April, I'm sure you all know, local authorities have now had the powers to hold virtual committee meetings, including planning committee meetings. Now, this would have been unthinkable 6 months ago, and yet now our research and others show that in the round they are using these powers. We know that RBKC in London was one of the first, if not the first, to use the powers on the 9th of April. Waltham Forest, Enfield, many have been close up the tracks far after, and apologies if you work for one of these boroughs I haven't mentioned, but there are so many of you using these these powers now, and but it doesn't stop there. The innovation in delegating decisions to officers has also been something that we've noticed has changed over the last 6 weeks. Now, as the professional body, we stand by the professional competency of Chartered Town Planners being able to do so with all the usual checks and balances in place. It is gathering a head of steam as to whether it's right that so many decisions are being delegated down. And what we would say is that a planner follows the local plan, follows the policies, and is well qualified to take these decisions during extraordinary circumstances in the short term. And so we stand by that opportunity if we want to cage it that way. Working from home, as we now know, is the new norm. You can see I'm working from home. I'm sure probably the majority of us are here. And again, if you'd asked most planning departments if they could just take the whole lot out and do it virtually, I think we would have had a mixed response a couple of months ago, and yet here we are now all doing it. But looking at some of the other practicalities of keeping the system moving, if you like, we know that some councils have been looking at and are actually doing things to ease some of the obligations on SIL, for example, in advance of any specific government guidance on this. They're just getting on with coming up to see what they can do. And I think East Suffolk in particular, outside of London, and I'd be really interested to hear in London similar approaches on that. Now, the good news is we're not aware of any large numbers of London boroughs having relocated their planning teams to be redeployed onto other areas. Of course, there are some emergency requirements, but actually at the moment it seems to be holding steady. But of course, this is incredibly early days, and this is something that we will be watching closely. So future challenges on the horizon, of course, will include reduced numbers of applications coming through and resulting fee income decreases with that. Enforcement activity is an interesting one to keep an eye on. Site notices and site visits, perhaps we can come back to that. The latter in particular is where digital may be needed most in the short term. But lots to consider. We're talking very regularly with MHCLG, more so than perhaps we ever have done, about the next bucket of stuff that needs urgent attention. Absolutely recognise they've moved at pace to deal with the first urgent things, not least the virtual planning committees, but the extension of planning permissions and those that were due to go over in the near future seems to be pretty high up on that list. Lots of pressure building on the planning inspectorate to get in gear quickly on their digital operations. So it's great to hear Graham will be sitting in this seat virtually in a week or so's time. And I think, you know, as everything has gone far more online, it's great to see that they held their first virtual site visit, or sorry, their first virtual planning appeal decision was issued yesterday. That's great to see. It's also excellent to see that they're going to have the first digital hearing on the 11th of May. And they clearly an opportunity for PINs to continue trialling further. You know, and as we reflect, if the High Court of Justice or the Court of Appeal can have virtual hearings, then it's hard to see why a planning inspectorate can't. And with the House of Commons project, I guess, now looking or pondering as to where to relocate temporarily, I think the new normal is perhaps they may have already found a solution in the middle of the crisis. And it is actually hard to see how things will go back exactly to how they were. And what we're keen to do is identify that best practice and hold that up as something that perhaps should be embedded in the way that we do things going forward. So just checking my time here, I'm okay. Where are the implications what are the implications for the immediate future and long term? Well, the priority for now within planning in London and elsewhere is to clearly keep the system moving and help to minimise a backlog. And then get ready for green recovery. In the longer term, as I just mentioned, embedding new ways of doing things into business as usual can only be a good thing. Digitisation of planning has effectively been fast-tracked. We've been talking about resourcing for planning for many years. Now is the time to make the case for the right type of resourcing, the right type of change. And there's nothing like a living case study that we will find ourselves in to help make the case and gather the evidence for that. Last week, we published our 5 priorities for planning reform in England. There's no point anybody sticking their head in the sand and saying there's not going to be any planning reform. There will be some change. There's inevitable to be some change. So we wanted to be on the front foot and set out what we thought that might look like. And we put very much at the heart of that, displaying leadership on digital transformation, please, MHCLG government. And by that, we really mean harnessing technological innovation to foster efficient and inclusive planning, building on the innovations that planners under COVID-19 lockdown have had to do real time. But this should include making all planning documents machine readable, standardizing the terminology, the processes across government, developing common evidence, measurable capabilities, investing in open source tools, and using these across the development sector. I know only too well in my job the amount of private sector consultants who say to me, why is it different across different areas? And we waste so much time because of that difference. Arguably, we might make lots of time out of the fees because of that difference, but actually, wouldn't it just be better if we were all on the same page? So, moving into the opportunities for the future. Well, the overarching opportunity is to embed green recovery into any future stimulus package. We must put that centre stage. An opportunity to reimagine our communities, how to build resilience into current and future requirements. Now, I mentioned those 5 asks that we published last week for reform. Number 1 was investing in place. We must invest greater in not just in housing. We get the housing, everybody gets that, even more so now because we're all in our homes all the time. And we know that housing, there is a need for more housing. But actually it's a broader investment in infrastructure and in particular affordable housing and investing in the sense of place. We talked about refocusing planning for 21st century ideas, and that's very much along the same theme. Yes, it's housing, but it's also about decarbonisation. It's about climate resilience, design and beauty, connectivity, accessibility, being able to move around in places that don't require you to get on crowded public transport, for example. Providing a clear strategic direction for planning. Now, this is something that London's got bucket loads of experience with, 2 decades now of a Greater London Authority and a London Plan. We feel there's so much more that other areas can learn from this strategic approach, if you like, that umbrella of the London Plan, the all-powerful strategic direction, which helps pull together all of the other strategies underneath it. And we'll be continuing to make that case. And last but not least, a strong plan-led system. We absolutely welcomed the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission's findings that provide this emphasis on proactive plan making. And I think nowhere can you perhaps see that at a strategic level than London. And technically, there is nowhere else actually in England, because there's only one other city region with spatial development strategy powers outside of London, and that's Liverpool. And as far as I know, they haven't written theirs yet. So there is an opportunity here to build on that. Now, I did say 5, well, the 5th was the investing in digital, which I already covered. Sorry, we may be having a bit of issue with the network here, but hopefully we're okay. So on the to pull this to some sort of conclusion, as I approach the end of my sort of 15-ish minutes, I think one of our strong conclusions out of this is that the role of planning is absolutely key at the moment, in not only in responding to a global pandemic, but in helping us plan for the communities going forward and embedding some best practice within that. All right, I'm just turning off my webcam briefly because I think there is a network connection, but I'll turn it back on again in a moment. Where was I? Planning is key now in planning for communities in the future, but I'm just going to try and turning my webcam on again. If you just bear with me. 1 second. There we go. Let's see if you can see me. Yeah, people can see me. There we go. But it's also important for the recovery, and there will be an absolute desperate urge to get on with recovery. I think what we're saying is that planning needs to be building in green recovery in that, so that we don't repeat mistakes of the past, but also that we can embed some of the principles, whether they be sustainability, responding to climate action, good design, health and well-being. It's all got to be in there. And I think in addition, I would, well, just bring it all together by saying that there is an opportunity here for reimagination of our communities, and in particular, how we embed planning very much at the vanguard of delivering for sustainable communities going forward. So I hope that I've given you some thought-provoking items that you may come back to me on now, and I hope that you were able to hear me, because I know the network may be a bit in and out. Apologies for that. I'll go and have words with my husband downstairs shortly. Hopefully he's not on Zoom and zapping up all of the network. Anyway, does that take me to the end of my sort of
It
spot?
does. It does. It takes you on to the Q&A session, and I've got how many questions? I've got 8 questions so far. So shall I just start throwing them at you? Are you happy and ready?
Yes.
So the first question is, what do you think is the most urgent priority to solve now?
Well, speaking on behalf of the membership, because a lot of our members have been in touch with us, and we did our membership survey, we've got over 1,000 responses the week before last. Without doubt, the most urgent thing now, I talked about the next bucket of stuff, is the extensions to permissions, those permissions that were due to fall out of validity, if you like, now or soon. So we've said very clearly to the government that we would like that all extensions that were due to expire in 2020 to be expected to carry through to the end of 2020. But also there is some urgent business in relation to site visits. I've been making that point very clear to CLG, and it is tricky. We accept it's tricky, but it will need sorting out. And then there is broader issues, which I kind of alluded to before. So I'll kind of perhaps stop there, but I will just say Section 106 triggers and SIL are things that need some careful handling, so we don't unravel many months or years of work, and we need to find pragmatic ways through to have sensible conversations with perhaps trigger points later on down the line when things have improved.
I think there's risks both ways there, aren't there? So that's really an interesting position. The next one I had was, what implications can you see for community engagement and involvement?
Well, in the round, the big implication is a positive one. What we've seen and witnessed is that planning committees that may have had, a small handful of people turn up and listen, now getting audiences of over 100 people tuning in. Why? Well, number one, because they can. Number two, they can do it from the comfort of their home. And I think this is an important step forward in engaging a broader proportion of the community, particularly those who may not have been able to get out in an evening to go and visit a council chamber. And so I think as much as there are huge downsides associated with a pandemic and what falls out of that, this digitisation of planning in its broadest sense means that engagement has been fast-tracked, digital engagement has been fast-tracked. So I think there's a great opportunity to reach out to a broader range of the community. I think if it's done well, and so far we see it's done well, then there should be every reason why this continues. Whilst we accept that planning committees may well go back to being held in the council chamber, these direct lines of communication open to this the broad local population, I think this is, and beyond, is a great opportunity.
So the questions are coming thick and fast now. It's great we know the platform works. Is it right so many decisions are now being delegated to officers?
Yeah, I did touch on this a little bit, partly because we've had some queries through from various journalists on this, because there's sort of rumblings that, hang on a moment, where's the democratic mandate gone? All of this has been delegated down. This is not on. Our starting point here is any decisions that are going to be taken will be taken in accordance with the local plan if they're delegated to an officer, because an officer is obliged to do so. And number two is these are extraordinary circumstances where there is a need to keep things moving, and if you can find a way to do so, then you should have a look at how you can do it. If that way involves delegating a decision to someone who is professionally qualified to be able to have the expertise to take that decision, whilst doing so with all of the usual checks and balances in place and consulting with the portfolio holders and everybody else I need to speak to, then we are comfortable with qualified or charter planners who are subject to competencies, but also, I should say, subject to a code of professional conduct. We're completely comfortable with them taking those decisions in the range of that code of conduct. So I don't see that there are any issues in this, as long as you've got all those usual checks and balances in place. And it's right that those organisations are keeping a close look on this, because we are all in uncharted territory, and it's not just a pilot in a couple of councils. This is all over the country. So it is right that people are watching. But I've every confidence that a chief planner taking those decisions will be doing so in the boundaries and parameters that I've just set out.
Yeah, there's some really kind of interesting learning I'm sure we're all going to take from that, and actually with hindsight I think we're probably going to take a lot more. But kind of building on that, what's been your biggest learning or takeaway so far from the pandemic?
There's so many, but I'm just trying to distill this down. I mean, number one is when you want to make things happen quickly, you can do. So I think we're all going to be increasingly questioning when we get told no, you can't do something in the future. You may have another look at it and kick it, prod it around a bit, or kick the tires on it, because we are doing things that previously we would have been said it's not really going to be possible, whether that's within our own organisations or within the planning sector throughout. So my biggest takeaway would be just how quickly the planning profession has responded. And there is no egg on face, there's no embarrassment here, there's no finger pointing. And believe you me, as someone who's been qualified as a planner for 20 odd years, we know, planners know, we're usually in the firing line for something along the route if we're slow off the mark. And as far as I can see, there's been no finger pointing, no blame assigned to planning or the planners holding anything up. And I know that you shouldn't judge your success on the lack of complaints, but actually I think that is a testament to the work that everybody is doing, including the 131 people who are tuned into this discussion currently. So I think you should all be incredibly proud. I think we're looking pretty good at the moment.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'm kind of getting lots of questions, but the one there's a really interesting theme, and I'm just going to take it straight from Mr. Harrington. How can planning assist economic recovery?
Well, I often say that planning is the gateway to construction, because obviously nothing happened without consent. So if we are going to, if we're going to get building more, whether that's building more affordable homes, whether we're going to be building more infrastructure, whether we're going to be doing things with the way that people need to travel around, then all of these things are going to require a thorough but also urgent-ish conversation with the planners. And so planning can assist with its usual, and this isn't tongue-in-cheek, this is my own personal view, can-do attitude. If we're planning, my members that I speak to, they want to be part of the solution, they want to support. And I think because we're in this unprecedented situation of being in a global pandemic, most people want to help. What can I do to help? Well, as a chartered planner, you can help, or any planner, any town planner, you can help by doing your bit at the very local level, whether that's in development control, development management, for a planning consultancy, bringing sites forward, keeping the whole system going, so that we can, when investment is sort of restarts or continues washing through, that we are there enabling. So I guess that's a long answer. The word I would use is enabling green recovery. And the bit that planning can do in the green recovery bit is they can help add the green. Because what may come in initially as an idea may need some enhancement to help deliver the green bit, whether we mean that in economic green, social green, or just pure green, or all three. But it's that discussion that the planners will be having about how things might need to look and feel slightly different to deliver green recovery rather than just quick recovery.
That's kind of critical, isn't it? So that the questions are coming really thick, so I think we've really only got time for 2 more. The first, I'm just going to try and stack them together, actually 3 more, sorry. The first one is a really interesting query that's kind of been the main concept coming from Melody Martins, which is, do you think that with social distancing, we're going to have to start reimagining communities, and we're going to come up with policies and shaping our communities to kind of manage social distancing, or will everything just stay the same?
No, I don't think everything will stay the same. And to be honest with you, for most of us over the foreseeable future, I don't think anything ever will be the same. And, you know, as I sit here now in my daughter's bedroom, looking out over the road in front of me, it's obvious to me that the pavements aren't wide enough. And it's obvious to anybody who moves around. And, you know, that will require us making a concerted case on behalf of what we do in the planning profession to have an open dialogue with developers, but also with highways engineers to say we're going to have another look at the standards because A, we want more people walking and cycling anyway, B, they've been doing it all for nearly 2 months and they guess what, they quite like it, and C, we probably need a little bit more space built in. I mean, that's just a very parochial example within a whole spectrum of things, but yes, there isn't just an opportunity for it. I think it's on all of us to make sure that we don't lose an opportunity to not just respond and be resilient, but to reimagine and perhaps reform. And, you know, that's whether that's, you know, the open spaces, the quality of those open spaces, the access to those spaces as well. That all those sorts of inequalities have come to the fore through this lockdown. And I think there is an opportunity to embed some responses, and there'll be some very clever minds and academics looking at all these sorts of things at the moment. What we want to do as a professional body is to link some of that thought leadership from the, you know, the biggest brains in planning academia in the land to actual practice. And generally, the only way you get stuff to happen is through policy. So, you know, whether that be through local plans or supplementary planning guidances, we may see COVID SPGs coming out. There's an idea. Should have trademarked that. But you know, my general mantra on this thing is no idea too crazy at this moment in time. We're in a pandemic. Let's get everything out and see what we might do differently.
I have 2 very quick questions and then we'll let you go. The first, I'm so sorry we're overrun. The first one is what is a resilience question, and we've got questions because different planning authorities are struggling with internet connections and what have you. And I think it kind of goes to that question really of what would we do differently next time from hindsight that we see now?
Well, operationally, the good news is, and what we would do differently next time, is a lot of the regulations and legislation is now in place. So, you know, if there is going to be a second wave, a third wave, future lockdowns, etc., good news is a lot of that stuff's there ready to go. I think that it's a fair point on internet connections. I mean, we have to remind ourselves that, you know, sitting in London, 8.6 million, 8.4 million, you'll correct me, you know, a big slug of those people are currently sat at home working from home on a local broadband that wasn't geared up for that. So we may well look for different levels of capacity when we're negotiating with or when we're bringing schemes forward in future. You know, what we thought was the required amount for infrastructure, our infrastructure world may have just gone topsy-turvy. We may have been negotiating for bus routes, but now we're negotiating for broadband. Who knows? But the width capacity needs to increase there clearly. I think it's worth reminding ourselves, you know, as we come out of this, certainly myself, having to taken an entire organisation that was 107 years old, and many of the local authorities here will be a lot older than that, into a digital operation in about a 48-hour period. To say we were somewhat shell-shocked by the end of it would be an understatement, but we did it, and you all did it. So I think we'll be a lot better prepared. We'll have bits of kit ordered. We will have sorted out enhancements. And as a profession, we'll be ensuring that when we're negotiating or embedding new things like even bigger broadband into developments going forward. So we'll be better prepared, and we'll know what's coming, because none of us, I suspect, have ever lived through a global pandemic. I don't think any of us have lived through a lockdown, not in the UK. I appreciate international callers on watching this may have different experience. So this is it's a phenomenal change that we've all gone through. But hey, we're still standing. So next time we'll be even more ready.
And the one final question I want to ask all of our speakers in this series: what piece of advice would you give to somebody coming into the profession now, given that we've both been through at least 2 recessions in the industry? What piece of advice would you give them?
Well, the advice that I give to anyone on their careers is don't be afraid to take yourself out of your comfort zone. I guess the first bit is don't leave the profession, please. We appreciate it's cyclical, and it's sort of, but just before this pandemic happened, we were just about starting to fill up the pipeline of future planners. The worst possible thing at the moment would be to lose that tranche of apprentices and graduates, whether they be in the private sector, public sector. Please don't go. But the reason for saying don't be afraid to get out your comfort zone is because it means you may need to be prepared to move around within the industry or the broader built environment industry to get other experience, whilst there may be some, lumps and bumps in what's required over the next 12 to 18 months, maybe beyond. But do stick with it. And one of the great things about planning is it's a career that you can have for life, but you can move around within the broader spectrum of the profession.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you for being our first speaker. Thank you for facilitating all this to happen. But most of all, thank you for the work you do representing the planning industry.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honour to be here on the first one. And thank you to everyone who took the time in your incredibly busy days, I'm sure, to dial in and do spread the word on this fantastic series. It's we've got capacity for 500, haven't we, Peter?
Yeah.
Yes.
But before we go, we also have to say a big thank you to Natalie Wells and to Lucy Barton for making the magic happen. So thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.